This is a lecture on Daniel Konikoff's, and I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce the second author, Akwasi Owusu Bempah, and their report is called Big Data and Criminal Justice: What Canadians Should Know. The objectives in this lecture are to summarize the material and also talk briefly about what a summary is. I also want to look at important aspects to consider in the report, as well as ideas or concepts that you should consider. And these two last things I've grouped together to some degree. So summarizing is a common writing assignment in most university courses, even outside of English or communications courses. And it is just referring to exactly what it sounds like, summarizing a piece of material in its entirety. So, of course, the first thing you need to do is know the piece of material that you're summarizing, and that means you need to read it and understand it. And in that way, I think it's very important, and it's a good habit to get into, so that anything you're reading in university and often at work, it's helpful if you read it and summarize it so that you know that you actually know the material. So there are three main requirements. A summary should cover the original as a whole. It should be presented in a neutral fashion, meaning just a moment, please. And the summary should be presented in your own words. So basically, you're paraphrasing. Normally in a summary, there are no verbatim quotations, and that just means no word for word quotations. And also normally, a summary is not very long. They're normally like a paragraph. So, like a half a page, double spaced, you're looking at maybe 350 to 500 words. So this is a summary that I wrote on this report. And this report is actually quite long. I think it was like over for 11 pages. I had to do some investigating to find out when it was published. And I found out that it was published on May 20th, 2019. Just from the report, I couldn't actually find a date. So when I went to actually write the summary, I had to hunt it down. You'll notice that I'm right away telling you where this report comes from, and it comes from the Broadbent Institute. I'm giving you right away the title of the material that I'm going to summarize, and I'm giving you the authors and their names, and of course the date. And then right away, I tell you what is their point. So you'll see here the introduction continues to assert the report's overall concern. So I'm telling you, this is their main point right here. So I'm just going to quickly read through this. The Broadbent Institute released their report, Big Data and Criminal Justice: What Canadians Should Know, by Daniel Konikoff and Akwasi Owusu Bempah, on May 20th, 2019. In the introduction of the report, Konikoff and Owusu Bempah gesture towards the overwhelming amount of data collected through various sources and devices throughout the average person's everyday life. The introduction continues to assert the report's overall concern. Technology is not immune to bias and intensifying numerous systems of discrimination. They indicate data being collected and processed and used to identify patterns as the spine of predictive justice. Konikoff and Owusu Bempah place predictive justice in an international context, illustrating Canada's relatively new use and involvement in predictive justice. Nonetheless, the use of predictive justice is relatively new even outside of Canada, and it has not received much scholarship or attention, especially in Canada. It's only in Europe, Britain, and the United States that any scholarship or studies have arisen to examine predictive justice. The report goes on to consider the use of predictive justice in policing, courts, and corrections. What the authors suggest has become clear is that discriminatory data generates discriminatory predictions. Konikoff and Owusu Bempah assert that the institutionalized bias that is currently entrenched in the justice system has been recreated in the predictive justice data, algorithms, and identification of patterns. Their conclusion indicates predictive justice is at work within the justice system in Canada, and its overall effect is currently unknown. However, Konikoff and Owusu-Bempah suggest Canadians to be diligent and watchful as predictive justice continues and assert other pattern identifying systems emerge and become more pervasive. So this is not perfect. There are parts of it I would like to change. I'm not going to because we're here now. There is some repetition. I say Canada, like it here, way too much. I needed to reword some of that. Um, the conclusion, my conclusion here is a little clunky. Um, but you know, I got to get it up. I got to get it done, people. So important aspects to consider and further considerations. So this is a quote, and you'll see here ND stands for no date, and I have that there because I initially couldn't locate a date from the report itself. So humans have become data producing machines, and that's the title of their introduction. It's unusual to have a title of it for an introduction, so I think the reason is they're really drawing the reader, our attention to how we have become, in and of ourselves, a sort of type of cog in the machine, and that we are data producing machines that are just feeding into other machines. So it's kind of an interesting subheading. And their very first paragraph kind of lifts off that every Google search, credit card purchase, social media interaction, and doctor's visit leaves traces of information about you, where you've been, who you've interacted with, and what you like. What's more, advertisers, data brokers, and government agencies collect and analyze the digital breadcrumbs you leave behind as you go about your day. Welcome to the world of big data. And then they go on indicating the form of inequality that can exist in data-driven technologies. So, and they're saying the realm of criminal justice is no exception. Big data has both the potential to infuse fairness into the administration of justice and, more worryingly, expedite the reproduction of existing biases. So this is their overall kind of concern, is that the institutionalized racism that is currently at work will continue to propagate and just continue to be recreated in other systems. They outline what big data is and how it's gathered into algorithms, and how these algorithms in turn identify patterns. And they also, they do try to be, I think, quite fair. They try to point out beneficial effects as well as detrimental effects. And this is just the kind of like they're doing definitions so that you'll understand what they mean by identifying patterns, how it's working, and predictive justice. Here, like if you look on this slide, little portion here of this slide, I'm asking you, what is your judgment of how these modes of identifying patterns work in policing, courts, and corrections? So algorithms, big data, and predictive justice may help police departments allocate resources better and redistribute their officers to focus their patrols on areas the data deems most in need of policing. So this is fairly positive. They can hasten the time it takes for officers to make an arrest by cross-referencing databases for quicker than police professionals ever could. These technologies can be used to cut court backlogs, draw snap predictions about someone's likelihood of reoffending, assign appropriate risk scores to offenders, and help reduce prison overcrowding in the process. So I'm asking, like, what is your judgment on these kind of things and this section? And based, of course, on the entire report. And they do indicate at one point in the report that when it comes to corrections, that the algorithm or the identifying pattern system that's in place, and there are numerous ones that are in place, so I'm just kind of grouping them all together, that they are not as adept at making decisions as human beings are. And they provide an example of that. So I think that's quite interesting and very telling. And I think that we often kind of want to place our trust in machines or technology because it seems as if it is somehow objective or neutral. And then they go on writing in the section biased data generates a biased predictions. And they are just indicating how, depending on who is creating this and how it's being used, technology cannot eliminate bias, stereotypes, or prejudice. It actually merely recreates it. And then this section I thought was quite interesting because the effectiveness is unknown. So we have things in place in like Vancouver, British Columbia, London, Ontario, and I believe Toronto. So we have these systems that are in place in these major cities, and we don't really know if they're actually effective, and we're not sure of we haven't any studies or scholarship on it. So it's a quite a big unknown. And the fact that they are in place and running is and we don't know how well they work or what that means is a little nerve-wracking to me personally. In their conclusion, they indicate that big data predictive software and risk assessment algorithms have already significantly shifted the criminal justice landscape. So in a lot of ways, there's no going back. We are in it. And as they suggest, we're just going to get deeper in it. These systems will become far more prevalent. So, what they are suggesting is that we as Canadians maintain a healthy skepticism about the use of big data and algorithmic decision making. So, their kind of final thought is yes, these are in place. They're going to continue being in place and become even more prevalent, and we need to be diligent and aware of them. So, that is my lecture on this report. I found it actually really interesting, and I thought it was very thorough. I thought they themselves tried to offer both sides, that there were benefits as well as drawbacks to the system, and so I quite liked that. Does it appear to you that this technology that has been in place in Europe, Britain, and the United States has done the work it asserts it can do? And I'm asking you to especially look at the United States and what is and has been happening there, and if these predictive justice elements that have been in place there, are they working? All right, and that is the end of this lecture. I hope you're having a lovely week, and thank you very much.